Okay. Alhamdulillah. نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين أما بعد. So tonight, inshallah, today that we'll be continuing discussing Al-Arba'in an-Nawawiyya, that this is this series put together by Imam Nawawi alayhi rahmatullah ta'ala that covers just over 40 something hadith on various topics. So today, inshallah ta'ala, that will be starting a new hadith. So we have ended a hadith that we were discussing for the past 2 weeks, and today we'll be starting a new hadith which I mentioned as hadith as-sabi' wa thalathun. So it'll be the 37th hadith in this series. So the 37th hadith in this series will be the start of the discussion for today, inshallah ta'ala. So as our normal procedures, that the hadith will be read and translated. Then we'll have a discussion relating to the hadith. Bi'awnillah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Aywa.
Bismillah wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulillah. Hadith number 37. The excellence and mercy of Allah, the exalted. عن ابن عباس رضي الله عنهما عن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم فيما يرويه عن ربه تبارك وتعالى قال إن الله كتب الحسنة والسيئات ثم بين ذلك فمن هم بحسنة فلم يعملها كتبها الله له عنده حسنة كاملة وإن هم بها فعملها كتبها الله عنده 10 حسنة إلى 700 ضعف إلى أضعاف كثيرة وإن هم بسيئة فلم يعملها كتبها الله عنده حسنة كاملة وإن هم بها فعملها كتبها الله سيئة واحدة رواه البخاري والمسلم في صحيحيهما بهذه الحروف.
We have فانظر يا أخي وآثار رحمة الله. You have that bit? That's it?
رواه البخاري ومسلم.
And that's the end of it?
في صحيحيهما بهذه الحروف.
Okay, طيب. Now, so that's the hadith is mentioned here. That, as we mentioned, is the hadith, the 37th hadith in the series. And the hadith had been mentioned, the hadith of Ibn Abbas. And the English, we did English?
No.
Sorry.
Ibn Abbas, may Allah be pleased with them both, narrated from Allah's Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam among what he narrates from his Lord. Blessed is he and exalted, that Allah the Exalted has written the good deeds and the evil ones. Then he explained that whoever decides to do a good deed but fails to do it, Allah records it with himself as a perfect good deed. And if he decides it and acts upon it, Allah the Mighty and Sublime records it with himself as 10 good deeds up to 700 manifolds and up to numerous folds. But if he decides to do an evil deed and he holds back from doing it, Allah records it as a perfect good deed. However, if he decides to do and actually does it, Allah records it as a single evil deed. Collected by Bukhari and Muslim.
Yes, that's the hadith that has been mentioned, that as the 37th hadith in this series, and the hadith to be discussed. So of those things that he mentioned, so we first start with the takhrij of the hadith. So matters regarding, as they say, tawthiq or takhrij of the hadith, were mentioning of the sources of the hadith. So here the author, he have mentioned that hadith in the Bukhari and Muslim, and that is said to be hadith muttafaqun alayh. So he mentions hadith rawahu Bukhari and Muslim. So of those other terms that are used, if hadith that is narrated by Bukhari and Muslim, that upon the same sahabi is referred to as muttafaqun alayh. Then so he mentioned in Bukhari and Muslim that this hadith then as for takhrij of the hadith, that they mentioned the source of the hadith that have been mentioned regarding the source of this hadith, that they mentioned the hadith in the Bukhari and Muslim, in the hadith in the Bukhari in his Sahih, also Muslim. Added to these, that they mentioned Ahmad in the Musnad. So the hadith can be found in Ahmad in his Musnad, Ibn Manda in his book Al-Iman. So Ibn Manda, that our book in Iman, that covered Iman, but he mentioned hadith with Isnad. So the hadith is found in that book. Also Abu Awana in his Mustakhraj. So you have a book that Abu Awana in his Sahih. Also Al-Bayhaqi in his book Shu'ab al-Iman. So Al-Bayhaqi have many works. But this particular hadith is found in his books, in the following books of his. One, Shu'ab al-Iman. So he has this book that's called Shu'ab al-Iman, that he discussed concerning the hadith about Shu'ab al-Iman, the different branches of Iman. And he mentioned each of them like a separate topics and other hadith relating to that topic. Also in another of his book that is called Al-Asma wa Sifat. So Al-Bayhaqi, he has a book that is called Al-Asma wa Sifat, that he mentioned Allah's name and attributes in this book. Said that ulama mentioned that book is a generally good book, except that Al-Bayhaqi of those ulama that fell into ta'wil of Sifat. So Al-Bayhaqi of the ulama in his book Asma wa Sifat, by said that the book regarding riwayat is good, what he's mentioned, but as for by his commentary, that he yu'awwil al-sifat. So Bayhaqi of those who at times may fall into ta'wil, explaining away the sifat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then of those works that I mentioned, Abu Na'im in his book Al-Hilya Al-Awliya. So Abu Na'im in his book Al-Hilya Al-Awliya. Also Tabarani is Mu'jam Al-Kabir. So Tabarani in his Mu'jam Al-Kabir. So I said Tabarani of 3 books that are referred to as Ma'ajim. Remember, we have mentioned them before. Ma'ajim Al-Tabarani first, 1. Kabir, the Kabir that is mentioned. Okay. And the others, Saghir, and Al-Awsat. So you have 3 books. Al-Mu'jam Al-Saghir, Mu'jam Al-Awsat, wa Mu'jam Al-Kabir. Then also they mention other sources that they mention Ad-Darimi in his Sunan or Al-Jami'. So Ad-Darimi in his Sunan or Al-Jami'. And other books that the hadith is mentioned. You have the books of Khatib al-Baghdadi in his book Tariq al-Baghdadi. So Tariq al-Baghdad. So Khatib al-Baghdadi also have like a book that discusses the history of Baghdad, concerning the ulama and the people who have gone through Baghdad and the events of Baghdad. So he mentioned the hadith is found with the isnad in this book, Tariq al-Baghdad. So some of the ulama have general certain books, but they still mention a book, a hadith with isnad, such as Khatib al-Baghdadi in most of his works, he will mention with isnad. Then also they mention Ibn Abdul-Barr. So Ibn Abdul-Barr in his book At-Tamheed, that he mentioned this hadith with an isnad going back to Ibn Abbas. Anhuma. So this hadith of Ibn Abbas regarding so the sources again in summary: Bukhari, Muslim, Ahmed, Ibn Manda, Abu Awana, Bayhaqi in several of his books, Abu Na'im, Tabarani in Al-Kabir, Ad-Darimi, others including Khatib al-Baghdadi, and also Ibn Abdul Barr in his book At-Tamheed. So that's concerning this hadith. So this is concerning this particular hadith that no one concerning the question concerning the authenticity of the hadith. So regarding hadith muttafaqun alayh, hadith mentioned by Bukhari and Muslim, then that indicates the hadith is authentic. That indicates that the hadith it is authentic. That as for this particular hadith, they mention also that the hadith, what they refer to as the ulama, that they refer to as that the hadith have shawahid. So shawahid in this sense, that become that shawahid by way of this hadith, which is similar to this hadith has been mentioned with generally the same wording and meaning that are mentioned by other Sahaba, referred to as shawahid. So shawahid, so you have mutabi'at and shawahid, but shawahid used more mainly today as being where the same hadith but found mentioned by other Sahaba. Amongst those other Sahaba that I mentioned this hadith, we have Abu Hurairah. Amongst those that narrate hadith of similar meaning, Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, Abi Dhar, Malik ibn Sa'sa'a, and also Anas bin Malik. So we have Abu Hurairah, Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, Abi Dhar, Malik ibn Sa'sa'a, and Anas bin Malik. Of those who have narrated hadith of this meaning. So that's concerning what I mentioned regarding this particular hadith by way of takhrij of the hadith or tawthiq of the hadith. You have some narration I've mentioned, somewhat slight difference in wording that of the narration in Sahih Muslim, of some narration in Sahih Muslim that I mentioned, man haddatha idha addatha abdi. We mentioned that idha haddatha abdi. So they use the word concerning haddatha abdi. So slight difference in certain wording, but the general meaning is the same. General meaning is the same. The next thing to be discussed that in this hadith we had mentioned before regarding this particular hadith, that is said to be the hadith of Ibn Abbas, and we have discussed concerning Ibn Abbas previously. We have discussed Ibn Abbas in previous hadith, with hadith number 19, we have discussed matter relating to the rawi of the hadith, who is Ibn Abbas, that we have covered him previously. Then I mentioned an Ibn Abbas رضي عنهما أن النبي عليه السلام فيما يروي عن ربه تبارك وتعالى. So we mentioned that this hadith then will be classed as what? Group of hadith. A hadith al-Qudsi. So hadith al-Qudsi. So this hadith will be classed as hadith al-Qudsi. So we have mentioned before regarding hadith al-Qudsi that hadith that have reached us, that they fall into two categories. Or revelation. So starting revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that have come to us, it come by two ways. By way of one, Quran, revelation, and also by way of the Sunnah. So the Sunnah is considered to be a part of the revelation. But as for the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, what have come to us by al-khabar, that the ulama mentioned that what have come to us by what they call khabar, that narrations, that either they fall into khabar, that goes back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that is called hadith al-Qudsi. So the Prophet ﷺ is narrated upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's called hadith al-Qudsi. Second, a hadith an-Nabawiyya, where things have come to us by way of the Prophet ﷺ regarding what he have, so it not go back, but it stops with him. So they mentioned concerning the hadith or khabar, that we look to the khabar by way of the isnad and this, by way of the sanad, or by way of the matan. The matan or sanad, if it ends with so look to where who is the final person in the chain. So if the final person in the chain, it goes back to the Prophet ﷺ said to be hadith an-Nabawiyya. Or if it ends, the khabar, it ends with the Prophet ﷺ narrated upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they said to be hadith al-Qudsi. Or others, as-Sahaba, wa-Tabi'in, and the likes. So all concerning this particular hadith, then considered to be hadith al-Qudsi, where that the one that the Prophet ﷺ is narrating upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not Quran. So the Prophet ﷺ narrating upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but it is not Quran. So revelation by way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but not Quran. It is called hadith al-Qudsi. Then this is hadith al-Qudsi. So in previous lessons, where we have covered in this particular book of Al-Arba'in an-Nawawiyya, that he has a few hadith that are said to be hadith al-Qudsi. So he has a few hadith that are of hadith al-Qudsi, of those that were mentioned before in hadith of Abi Dhar. That would be hadith, the 24th hadith. It said that we have covered before was hadith al-Qudsi, the hadith of Abi Dhar, where the Prophet mentioned that he mentioned فيما يروي عن الله سبحانه وتعالى قال يا عبادي إني حرمت الظلم الحديث. So that hadith is said to be hadith al-Qudsi. So we have discussed certain points regarding hadith al-Qudsi in that hadith of number 24. And also, if we were to look at the hadith that comes after, it's also the hadith that comes immediately after this particular hadith is said to be hadith al-Qudsi. So the hadith that comes straight after also is classed as the hadith al-Qudsi. So you have mentioned several hadith al-Qudsi. Previous, we have done it before, and also this particular hadith. So hadith al-Qudsi, you have certain masail that relates to hadith al-Qudsi. And we have mentioned some of those previously. That hadith al-Qudsi, so the hadith al-Qudsi is said to be from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then the ulama, they discuss, is the wording of this of hadith al-Qudsi, is the wording of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, lafdan wa mana, is the wording and the meaning both from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Prophet ﷺ is just mentioned what was given to him, both in wording and in the meaning. And also they mentioned that, others mentioned that hadith al-Qudsi, that lafdan is from the Prophet ﷺ, but the manner from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That the meaning from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the Prophet ﷺ kind of somewhat put the words together. So that's the difference. That but Jumhur Ahl Sunnah, so on these points regarding hadith al-Qudsi, that even that it went into a matter regarding that it kind of somewhat went into a matter regarding aqadiyya. It went to that's discussed in the books concerning hadith, but also in the books of aqaid, or discussed in that area regarding is hadith al-Qudsi, the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, lafdan wa mana. That as we mentioned, that so Ahl Sunnah, like majority of the ulama of Ahl Sunnah, and especially of contemporary, that they kind of more of the view that hadith al-Qudsi, lafdan wa mana min Allah, that both the wordings and the meaning of hadith al-Qudsi goes back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Prophet Islam is just narrating upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So both wordings and the meaning go back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's the correct view. That's the more correct view. And the khilaf, even though they say khilaf, but the correct position is the one of majority of the ulama to sunnah on this matter regarding Hadith al-Qudsi. So Hadith al-Qudsi, then doesn't mean that Hadith al-Qudsi automatically becomes Sahih. So not like the Quran. So Hadith al-Qudsi not like the Quran. Nam. So with Hadith al-Qudsi, Nam, then also it is scrutinized by way of it being critiqued and graded as being authentic or not. So the Quran, there's the process, there's no need for that process regarding the authenticity of the Quran by way of the isnad. As for Hadith al-Qudsi, then this process regarding, because said to be of, so it goes on to that, so it is also critique by way of Hadith al-Qudsi, that which is authentic and that which is not. So it goes on the Quran, the process concerning that, the process is said that not being concerned is not it being critiqued to see if it is authentic or not. So in this case, the Hadith in Bukhari and Muslim that proves it is authentic, but there are Hadith al-Qudsi that may not be authentic based upon the isnad. So by saying Hadith al-Qudsi doesn't mean automatically it's authentic. So Hadith al-Qudsi will go under the same rules of being verified regarding its authenticity. And we mentioned other difference between Hadith al-Qudsi, that with Hadith al-Qudsi, that compared to the Quran, that both differ. With Hadith al-Qudsi, it cannot be read in the Salah. So the Quran, which is revelation from Allah, that is read in the Salah. As for Hadith al-Qudsi, the person cannot read Hadith al-Qudsi in the Salah, even though it comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. With the Quran, Hadith al-Qudsi, that with Quran, according to the ulama, that the person needs to be in a state of tahara, reciting and carrying the Quran. So the ulama, a discussion regarding the Quran to be read and to be carried, the person should be in a state of tahara, according to some of the ulama. With Hadith al-Qudsi, then that discussion is not even there. So with Hadith al-Qudsi, the person, not a requirement at all for the person to be in a state of tahara to read the Hadith al-Qudsi, nor for the person to carry a book with only Hadith al-Qudsi. So that discussion is not there. So Hadith al-Qudsi and Hadith and Quran, that they differ in many matters. They differ. There are a difference between both in several things, in many areas.
Hadith al-Qudsi come down from Jibreel as well.
Ay, to Jibreel alayhi salam. Aywa. As I mentioned, so they mentioned the different riwayat of the hadith, also the different shawahid of the hadith. The next of the thing to be discussed so the next thing they discuss of this hadith regarding hamiyat hada hadith. So the importance of this hadith, so the status of this hadith. So as mentioned by in some of the books of Nawawi, he himself can somewhat comment on the importance of the book. They mention Undur ya akhi. So Nawawi, he commented by mention Undur ya akhi. So he mentioned, look, my dear brother, so like pay attention, my dear brother. So he showed also language of the ulama, that he mentioned Undur ya akhi, look, my dear brother. So he showed that lutf, that gentleness that he shows toward other Muslim. Now, so you find that the ulama, that when they want to address other Muslim, or can somewhat bring, they mention either, I mention Undur ya akhi, look, pay attention, my brother, or I mention I'lam rahimakullah, that may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy upon you, or they said, take into account, then they'll mention, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then he mention Undur ya akhi, ila lutf, ila adam, lutfillah ta'ala, to the importance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's like mercy towards us. Ta'ammal hadhi al-fadh, by way for you to ponder over, contemplate over the wording that are used in this hadith. Where they mention, عِنْدَهُ إِشَارَةٌ إِلَىٰ اِعْتِنَابِهَا. They mention wal-kamil and different words that are used in the hadith. So I'm going to somewhat mention that this hadith showed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy towards mankind. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy regarding how things are somewhat weighed up or rewarded by way of things that are good and bad. Good, that the reward for it is multiplied, but with evil, one evil, you get one strike. With good, you get many ticks. Now, so it showed that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mercy towards mankind. Then also of other ulama have mentioned regarding concerning hadith, that I mentioned that again concerning ifad the fadlillah subhanahu wa ta'ala ibad, that again regarding that this hadith, it shows Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's bounties upon his servants. So it shows Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bounties upon his servant, but we aita tadaha fal ajr, where the person, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he multiplies the person's reward and for things of hasanat, but as for the person sayyat, 1 for 1. So for one evil, then 1 strike against you, not 10, or it is multiplied. As for good deeds, that they are multiplied, so 1 good deeds you can get, it is multiplied to various, as I mentioned, to go to 1 deed 10 reward, and at times up to 700 plus or beyond this. So for 1 deed that is done, that is good, the reward for it is many. As for evil, 1 evil, you get 1 strike against you. So most I mentioned regarding concerning that this hadith, it shows regarding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's grace and bounties upon mankind. Then I mentioned the asl wal hadith aslun fi kitabat al hasanat wa sayyihat wal ham, that biha, that this hadith, it shows regarding the asl, that the asl regarding that the recording of hasanat and sayyiat, and also think the person with ham, the person might have thinking about doing something. So ham, the person thinking and contemplating about doing something. So the person is rewarded according to each of those. Do hasanat, they're rewarded. The person do sayyihat, then also a strike against them. And also the person will ham, who person might have a thought or thinking of something, that he may be rewarded. At times he may be rewarded just for having the thought of doing a good deed, as to be discussed. So as for the hadith, it mentioned regarding, so this hadith, that they mentioned from the hadith the general meaning, or what can be taken from the hadith. So the overall meaning I mentioned, Inna Allaha kataba al-hasanat wa sayyiat, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have record regarding things of al-hasanat wa sayyiat. So things of hasanat wa sayyiat. Then I mentioned thumma bayyin thalik, then this is made clear, faman ham. So regarding how this process takes place, regarding the person being rewarded or things being against the person, how those things are taken to, or the person is rewarded accordingly. Mentioned فَمَنْ هَمَّ بِحَسَنَةٍ فَلَمْ يَعْمَلْهَا كَتَبَهُ اللَّهُ لَهُ إِنْدَهُ حَسَنَةً كَامِلَةً. So the person will just have the thought about something, as we'll discuss what is ham and what is the difference between al-ham and an-niyah. Nam, what's the difference between both? The person who may have said ham wa niyah, what's the difference? So to be mentioned regarding the difference between both al-ham wa niyah. So an-niyah, they mentioned, so the hadith mentioned that, the person does have an idea about something, then the person but did not act according to it, but have that idea, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala may record for him it as a good deed. So the person just thought about something but did not carry it through, he may be rewarded just for that. Now, for having a good thought or a good idea, but did not follow through on it, then I mentioned that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala may record for the person that as still a good deed, still recorded for him as a good deed. Then it mentioned that, and if the person was to carry through on that act, he had the idea, thought about it, then he carried through on the act, then it is mentioned instead a good deed, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward the person regarding that al-ashara hasanat ila sab'amiyah da'fan, that a person could be rewarded from 1 up to 70 100 reward just for that one deed. So for each deed 10 plus, or it could even exceed ila ad'af kathira, and it could even exceed this amount. So it showed that a person having the thought, then following through, then a person is rewarded multiple times for this. Then also it mentioned regarding concerning وَإِنْ هَمَّ بِسَيِّئَةٍ, the person that have a evil thought and didn't act upon it. Then it mentioned in the hasanat, then by the person having the thought but did not act upon it, he didn't go through on it but have the thought, then the person, it will be because he didn't act upon it, then he's rewarded. Hasana, then a person عنده حسنة كاملة. So the person who have the idea about something but did not follow through on it is rewarded. Nam is rewarded for this. Then I mentioned, as for the person, so the person considered that he had a thought of something evil. The person had an evil thought, but then didn't carry through on it. But he said, but he left it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be discussed. He left it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Nam, so the person who, so that is somewhat is understood by the person who had an evil thought about doing something wrong, but then didn't carry through on it, didn't fulfill it, because for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not because that was other factors that blocked him from doing that thing. The person was thinking of, for example, to go on the road and to steal. But then when he went out there when he went, and when he looked outside, he saw that there was a lot of feds, a lot of police officers. So he said, no, there's too much police out there for me to do anything. So he didn't carry through, because not that he changed it, it's a change of thought. Why? Because of the police. Not because of, for himself, for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's only because of the police being out there. So he had a change of thought. So the person, so in that case, then that's different. That is different from the person who didn't do it at the thought, and then before he even get up, he said, no, I'm not going to do that. That's haram. You understand? So the person said, no, even the thought came to his mind, but I'm going to put that aside, make istighfar, and not carry through on it, because not because of police or anything, it's because of that he says not something which is wrong. I'm going to not carry through on that, because for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make this thing haram for me to do. Then that's different. Then that's the person who is rewarded. Nam, get something? Then I mentioned وَإِنْهَمْ بِهَا, then the person have no فَأَمِلَهَا كَتَبَهَا اللَّهُ سَيْهَا وَاحِدًا. But the person then have the thoughts and then carry through, then he'll be rewarded as one strike against him. Allah put on that, will record him as one evil against him.
So in that example you just gave in the second one, I was listening, one of my sahib, he called me today on this exact same masala that you're speaking about. And he mentioned that the sheikh he was listening to said in the explanation that if that person that you're talking about,
Which one?
the one that looked out the window and saw the police,
So the one who wanted to do and do the stealing, but when he went out,
no, he saw that there was too many police
okay,
out there, and that's the reason why he had a change of thought. He still
rewarded.
no, he still gets the sin of if he carried out that action.
Hey, okay, so that's not in. So I said that's in line. He said that, so you have the case of the same, for example, the person have the thoughts of an evil, but then to go out and rob on the street, to pick pockets, but then when you look out to see if he understands, so he observe when you look out, so he's in the masjid or he's in his house, wherever he's at. So when you look out or when you open the door to look, he saw that there's police officers all over the place. So he didn't, or there was no one out there. The road is somewhat, there's no one in the street for him to rob. So he said, no, I'm not going to go out. But that was not because of a change of heart for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's due to the circumstance. Then that the person has said, because the intention was to go, but he changed his thought because of other factors, which is that there was police that kind of somewhat, he didn't understand, that stopped him, not for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but other factors. So that person, as if he had done some evil, as if, because he wasn't intending to change his mind, other things caused him to change his mind, which is police were out there, or when he went, when he went out, because he went, and he was on the verge of doing it. But when he went out there, something else changed from outside his hands, not by way of his own hands. So, Aywa, was said in the other case with a person that he changed of thought for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He thought about it, but he said, no, stop for Allah. That's from the shaitan. I should have been, and I said, no, I won't even understand what I did. My thought was wrong, evil. Then can somebody left the act for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then that's the one who's rewarded. Now, that's the one that is rewarded. So from the hadith it shows regarding concerning al-ham, that which is different from an-niyah. So the ham, we say what I said, the ham is in English, that the translate is having thoughts.
Probably the sides. Decides.
So the person that I mentioned concerning the an-niyah, so I said that the farq between an-niyah wal ham, they said an-niyah here qasd al-qalb al-jazim, that a person have like a strong, determined choice or made a decision to do something. So an-niyah, the person make a decision to do something, and he's somewhat clear on that matter, to do something and to do that thing immediately. So with niyah, it's usually very close to the act. Now, with a person's intention is that he already made a decision to do something, right or wrong. That is with niyah. So the person already come to a conclusion, come to a decision to carry out something and to do that thing. Somewhat said muqtarin, it is somewhat done with the act, with close to the time that you have there, the niyah. So for example, salat. The person have an intention that salat. So the niyah that should be close to the time of the salah. But overall concern the person with a niyah is something in the heart. The person somewhat have made a determination to carry out something and do it soon as possible. That's a niyah. As for al-ham, that I mentioned that mujarrad al-khatir, with a person something that things going through your mind, thoughts going through your mind. So with al-ham is that the person having thoughts in his mind, things going through his mind. That is where he may not be and then come to a decision, just in going through his mind, thinking about things. Or I said tafkir fil umur, so the person is thinking out things in his mind, but hasn't come to a determination. So become more. So when a person now said a niyah, when a person might have that thought and then want to carry it out, it comes into a niyah. So an-niyah is when now the person now come to a conclusion and now gonna put things in place to carry out that thing. Then that becomes the niyah. When now he's more determined and more clear as to what to be done. So the person in the masjid, the person in the house, have the thoughts of stealing, was going through his mind. But then decided, yes, I'm gonna do it. And then put on his clothes. You understand that he needs to put on, and then you understand going out on the street, then that now become a different matter. That become the person in the house think in his bed about anything. Then that's just ham.
Whereas the first one was niyah.
So the person now said, so anything that we are thinking about, and then we start then to we'll come to a decision, a conclusion, and then we start then to act upon it. Then that now become ham, then a niyah.
Decision, we don't act upon it yet. If you have a decision, we haven't acted upon it.
And that maybe that's depending on, yes, and that could be also a niyah, because you have come to a conclusion. But sometimes that like you have an intention, the niyah to pray Isha, but still you have an hour and a half. You understand? But still, you understand? So that's the intention. But for it to be, so the proper intention will be right before the act. So now we may be considered to be al-ham. He has have the idea and the thought to make Isha in the masjid. But close at the time get close, then it becomes more of an intention right before you do the act. So ham is much more general, just any thought that comes in a person's mind, good or bad. And we all go through that. Everyone go through that process of, we have different thoughts, you play with things in your mind, type of thing. So those things that occurs. So the person is having thoughts about things, then that's ham. And niyah, when the person are more definite about what they're going to do. Then they start to discuss concerning the hadith, that after they discuss first regarding the hadith, they discuss matter regarding فيما يروي عن ربه سبحانه وتعالى أو تبارك وتعالى. So of the thing I will mention before they start, so this class is the Hadith al-Qudsi, where the Prophet ﷺ narrated upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So whatever come is what has been narrated and mentioned by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala regarding this particular hadith. And so that inshallah ta'ala will And we'll end for today there and discuss the hadith, the points of the hadith in the next lesson. Wabillahi ta'ala tawfiq.
You have someone else question.
Eh?
If a person, like people of Tawheed, people of Tawheed, the Iman, the Salah, they would have, would be correct to say they have less ham of, like, say,
My fine, the person who's closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, regarding said, Alham, they will have it. But it will be more towards things of piety. You understand? But it doesn't, that they are not free from having thoughts of, that may be sayyah. But as I said, they may be less in following through on those things. Maybe less in following through because, you understand, so less for the people of at-taqwa, of piety. But both will have those things. Aywa?
I'm thinking how to ask the question.
But the person who wrote the question, where's it coming from?
It's me.
Oh, okay.
You know, obviously, in order to do acts of ibadah, you have to have niyyah. Niyyah should be attached to the things of ibadah. So, can one say if a person and the niyyah, in order to do that ibadah, needs to be present. It's wajib to have this niyyah in order for that action to be accepted. So now I'm saying that if a person, is it permissible for a person to have ham of something wajib? Or is that allowed?
Okay, there's something which is wajib. For example, of the ulama, for example, as an example, I just want to say that to have ham regarding something which is wajib. Then yes, because the person might have thoughts that of something which is wajib. So for example, with some of the ulama, those who say, for example, getting married is wajib. Those who say, you have a group, you understand, that say that getting married is wajib. That every person should marry, especially the person who has the ability. So the person who has the ability, they said it is wajib. You have, financially, you can afford it, and the likes. So all the things are in place. You understand? But you understand that, but Jumhur of the ulama take the point that even a person who has the ability is not wajib. But a person still have the thought, you understand? So maybe we're thinking, do I want to get married? You understand? Yes or no? To go through, the person might be thinking, do I want to do it now or later? So he does having thoughts, I'm in university, you understand? But you understand, I have a little job going, I'm making a food, a wife, you understand? So still may have ham regarding even thing which is wajib. But so with act of ibadat, you understand, becomes with niyyah, becomes with ibadat, that is wajib, then having so the person have the intention that the intention that which is a form of that alham, the person that wajib ibadat, to still think about something which is wajib, that is still possible. Yes, I said at the time to carry it out, then that intention that ham will change into at that point become your niyyah and become that at the point that you're going to carry out the act itself.
Right now we've got ham to reach Ramadan or fast Ramadan, but then
when it comes, then it becomes wajib. Where the niyyah have to be there to fast. When you're gonna go to the act of siyam, now it is you have to have the niyyah of actually fasting and going through the acts of worship in Ramadan. But now
you can start thinking about.
You're thinking about it. You understand? You're preparing yourself mentally. Yeah, all those things just ham that you have now thoughts and ideas, but when Ramadan enters, then it becomes now you have to go through it. You have to live through it. Aywa?
So what if you don't have ham to fast Ramadan from now? Is that wrong?
No, I can't say it's completely wrong, but who wouldn't? You understand? Not to say that it's completely understand, but because things that you know, people have things that you know that you planning or expecting to be done. You understand? The acts of ibadah, we can have somewhat of an idea what to expect. So we have an expectation or things to expect. So at a certain point, you have Ramadan, we have Hajj, we have Eid, you understand? We have the Salawat. So you have certain things that we know what to expect. So generally regarding those things, we have the idea that if I'm, you understand, paying zakat, if I'm wealthy, you have that, the thought, you understand, if I'm able to can pay zakat, give sadaqah, but you might find that when it actually know that you fulfill all the criteria, then it becomes, yes, you have to go through and have the intention, because now you fall together people, you have to carry it out. But generally, the Muslim have that he wants to do things of good in various ways. Thing which is wajib and thing which is mustahab, mandub. We have at least the general idea and thoughts of doing those things. So, A.
An action of the heart that is haram, and a person hates this Muslim person, he has hatred for a Muslim or something, and then that action, is he accountable for it one time, that action in his heart that time, or just when he meets Allah, the state of his heart, when he comes and he dies and he comes to meet his Lord?
So the person who have this hatred towards another Muslim.
Yeah.
So is it as an action of the heart?
Yeah.
You understand? So is he blameworthy, or
he's blameworthy? Is that like one sin then?
It is one sin
in that thing, and the state of his heart when he meets Allah, and his heart is gonna not be salim.
Hey, for sure, when he meets Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then he'll be accountable. But also in the dunya. So I said in the dunya, you understand, then that is something which is blameworthy. You understand, to have that. If a Muslim said, might have a dislike to a Muslim, and what's the reason? Is it for a Muslim, you understand? So if it's a justifiable reason for him to have a dislike towards a Muslim, you understand? So if you have a case which is justifiable and a case which is not. So every Muslim should have a degree of love for another Muslim, as being akhu in Islam. You understand? As part of the wala of Muslim having allegiance towards each other, and of the allegiance, love towards each other to a degree. But then a Muslim says, so it becomes now to have hatred towards another Muslim in a sense of al-bara, which is not full, complete disassociation due to him falling into sins or thing which is wrong. You understand? So that may vary, you understand? So you can have it towards a Muslim, but said if it's justified, if it's unjustified, person blameworthy, and meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as mentioned, his heart will have to be cleansed. Those things have to be removed for him to enter Jannah.
And it's recorded like a sin.
It's recorded. You understand? So the angel record even things regarding, can say that in most, you understand? So it's recorded as an act. It's recorded as an action. So the act, either act amal al-qalbi or jawarih or lisan. So the actions that, you understand, a discussion between ulama regarding the angel record thing, which is like the person's thoughts or ideas. You understand? But of certain acts, that of the qalb is recorded. Mahabba, bugd, aywa.
The hadith that Hamdallah, I think, when he said that he has bad thoughts and he went to the Prophet and he said, if he was like he was with me all the time, the angels would come down and shake your hand.
Don't recall that one. Hey.
When we are with you, we remember the akhirah. But it's not that it has evil thoughts. We remember the akhirah as though we see it. And when we're with our families, we forget.
So I'm saying, so the sense of is that so you find that show concerned as Muslim concerning the height of iman. Therefore, you understand that when you're in a certain that when with certain people or certain settings, then your iman increase. You understand? And when you're in certain setting, can some things change. You understand? So you're in everyday chores of life. Then that can, you understand, you can sometimes be forget about certain things and lessen your iman. But when you're in another setting, that can increase of your iman. So that different settings might impact on the person. Your iman would not be the same all the time. Some settings may increase, and some settings that may cause your iman to be, you understand, decrease. That you're working in an environment where a lot of people are not of your type. And your mind set, you understand? So sometimes that may impact on a person. So the settings may impact on a person. So that inshallah ta'ala, any other thing will end, wabillahi ta'ala, tawfiq. And also that the Muslim still to function,